Well, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Assembly Minority Leader Will Barkley. I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank my colleagues from both the Assembly and the Senate. I want to thank Vivian Zayas from Voices for Seniors for being here. And I want to thank Congressman Molinaro also for being here. He's going to update us in a minute, I think, on this issue, what they're doing on the federal level. But as everybody's heard, 4 years ago to this day, Governor Cuomo and the DOH set forth a directive that put COVID patients in nursing homes. And as a result, we know this, as a result of that directive, 15,000 seniors died. And I think sometimes you hear about these numbers, you see them on a page, and you don't think a lot about it. You don't think twice about it. But I think it's important today to remember these were family members, these were friends, and these were loved ones who passed away. So it's reasonable at that time to ask, why did that happen? Why did this happen? Another reasonable question is, do we have protocols in place now to prevent this ever from happening again? We were all happy. We were happy that the state hired a consultant to look into nursing home deaths. We were happy that the governor signed legislation known as Reimagining Long-Term Care Task Force that had a broad mandate. But one of the things was looking at COVID deaths in nursing homes. That was back in 2021. What we're not happy about, 3 years later, what have we got so far? We've only gotten silence, only silence. We need answers. These grieving families need answers. New Yorkers need answers. And us in state government, again, need answers so we can put protocols in place to ensure this tragedy doesn't happen again. So we have a number of speakers here. I'm so happy my colleague, former colleague, but good friend, Congressman Mark Molinaro is here and wants to address the group. Excuse me.
Thanks to my friend and the Assembly Leader Barkley and all the members of both the Senate and Assembly Republican conferences. I come here today both as a seated member of Congress, but also having served prior to that for 12 years as a county executive. We were on the front lines of responding to both the COVID pandemic and the economic shutdown. And those are two very different things, both of which, however, because of actions of prior legislatures, empowered a governor to take action that we know, led to lives being threatened, risked, and lost. But I also come here today, 4 years later, as the son of a father who lost his battle to COVID. Now, he wasn't in a nursing home, but he spent his last few hours in isolation in a hospital. I know personally the human anguish that came out of those 2 very long years, and saw firsthand the choices that the then governor made and health department made that made it more complicated, made it more difficult, and ultimately risked the lives of New Yorkers. And I am comforted that there are families still who are willing to stand 4 years later, shoulder to shoulder with legislators who simply want answers. And by the way, not whitewashed answers, not a sanitized report, but a true, honest account of what decisions were made, why they were made, how they were made, and making sure that 2 things occur. Not only that we never repeat the mistakes made, but that there is a moment of reckoning for the 15,000 families who lost loved ones. This is an emotional time for many people who lost loved ones. And 4 years later, we have a degree of perspective, but what we don't have is the detail that an analysis should have presented. In fact, New Jersey completed their analysis. And New Jersey, by the way, painted a very bleak picture based on decisions their governor made that were less drastic, that were less risky than this state's governor took. And so we already know the framework for what a true, honest report will present. That the decision and the order to return seniors, knowing and in some cases ignoring whether or not they had tested positive for COVID, into nursing home facilities where they knew they had no choice but to accept them, without protocols being put in place, without instructions being put in place, and with no capacity to respond, then hiding the true data of deaths and the connection to those decisions, all, by the way, while someone was being paid to write a novel. All of it, we know, has absolutely resulted in lives being risked and ultimately lost. And too often, those in power forget that their actions and their decisions have real impacts on real people. Now, in Washington, we're taking it seriously, despite the fact that the previous governor and his administration continues to refer to members of the Oversight Committee in New York terms. The serious review underway now, subpoenaing the former governor, investigating and reviewing the decisions made, taking the time necessary to unearth and provide the greatest degree of transparency, that is underway now. And I am grateful that this committee is focused on understanding the detail of the decision, the cover-up of the data, and the results of the orders, the loss of American and New York lives. And so, without question, the families who live on with tremendous loss deserve accountability. Former Governor Cuomo, former Commissioner Zucker must be held accountable. And no matter where the detail or truth or facts guide us, the families deserve a reckoning. And so I am heartened by my colleagues in the Senate and Assembly who will not lose focus. If this were a structure fire in a small community, we would have engaged in an earnest, honest review, and it'd be before the public in the matter of weeks. If this was a hurricane or a tornado through a region of the state of New York, within a month or two, there'd be an earnest, honest review and presented for those of us to make decisions that we would ensure policies not be repeated. This is by far one of the greatest challenges to have faced the world in 100 years. And there were decisions that we know were made, not based on fact or data, not based on science, too much based on politics, and perhaps likely compelled and emboldened by profit. Decisions made that ultimately risk lives, and we deserve, New Yorkers deserve, policymakers, both parties, both houses, and future generations deserve to know the facts, the details, and the data. So these mistakes, many of which we can acknowledge are mistakes, will never be repeated again. And I'll conclude just with this. We are focused on this population and these folks and these families, but I can tell you, as the parent of a child with a disability, horrific decisions were made that threaten and risk the lives of individuals with intellectual, physical, and developmental disabilities as well. And New Yorkers and their families deserve the same answers. Thank you.
Yeah. Next, I want to welcome to the podium Senator Patrick Gallivan.
Thank you, Leader, Congressmen, our guests, my colleagues. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, it is, everybody. And we know it's been 4 years since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. And at that time, of course, none of us had any idea of the devastating human and economic effect the outbreak would have on all of us. In response to the crisis then, the then governor and the State Department of Health issued hundreds of mandates, directives, and executive orders impacting residents, hospitals, nursing home patients, businesses, and schools. Every New Yorker, everyone was impacted by these decisions, and the ramifications linger today. Appropriately, an after-action review of the state's COVID-19 response was ordered by Governor Hochul to examine New York's policies and procedures and to determine what worked, and as important, what didn't work. That analysis is long past due. At a cost of more than $4 million, one would expect this comprehensive review to be completed in a timely manner as promised. The legislature, and more importantly, the taxpayers of New York deserve it. As the ranking member of the Health Committee, I'm very frustrated by these delays. It's time for the group that was commissioned, the Olson Group, and the governor's office to provide an update. Towards that end, we have forwarded a letter to the governor's office, to the the Commissioner of Division of Homeland Security, who is actually the liaison with this Olson group, looking for answers. And we can provide the letter to anybody who wants it afterwards. The report and its recommendations are critical and will help us decide how New York should and should not respond to future health emergencies or other disasters. These delays are not acceptable and are a disservice to the citizens of New York.
Thank you, Senator. As I said earlier, you see these numbers on a page, and sometimes you forget that these are family members who perished during the COVID and as a result of what now seems to be a terrible policy. So to that end, I'd like to welcome Vivian Zayas. She's the co-founder of Voices for Seniors. She's someone who was directly impacted by the March 25th directive. Vivian is visiting us from Long Island. She is, as I said, she's a co-founder of Voices for Seniors and was inspired to create the organization in honor of her mother, Anna Martinez, who sadly passed away unexpectedly at a Long Island nursing home during the pandemic. So please welcome Vivian to the podium. This slide's forward, so be careful.
I want to thank everyone this afternoon for being here. I want to thank our legislators this morning for not forgetting our seniors. Joe DiStefano, Assemblyman Joe DiStefano, a good friend of ours, asked me if I was ready for my time to shine. And when my response to him is that my mother shines today. I lost my mother 4 years ago. For me, it's like it was yesterday, and I will not stop speaking for her and for the other seniors who've lost their lives. So on behalf of all the families of Voices for Seniors, we want to thank our elected officials today for hosting this event to honor our parents and other loved ones who lost their lives in nursing homes during the COVID pandemic. If Hochul or Cuomo or anyone else thought that we would forget or go away, they're sadly mistaken. We're here today to continue our call for accountability and for answers into the deaths of over 15,000 seniors. Our loved ones died alone, and in many cases they were neglected, and in many cases they lost their lives due to the lack of will of surviving due to the isolation and the lockdowns. Their lives counted, whether they were 40 years old, 50, 60, 70, 80, or older, their lives counted. Our standing firm on our continued call for answers, we want to know how our leaders failed our senior community. We want to know how our long-term care system failed our senior community. And after we get answers and accountability, we want to know how we're going to fix it. Our mothers and our fathers, our grandparents, our loved ones need not die in vain. My mother, Anna Martinez, was in a rehab after a routine knee surgery, a story that I will not stop telling. We truly accounted that she would be home in 3 months, and she would be home cooking her meals, which we loved. And unexpectedly, she died the weekend that we expected for her to come home. Our dreams were shattered when we were kept in the dark. We were not told she had a collapsed lung, that she was gasping for air in her room. All the while, they were filling out her discharge papers. We were told to pick her up that morning, and when I called my mother to tell her I'd be on my way, she would not answer her phone. We did not know that she was having trouble breathing. We were not told she caught COVID. We were not told there was COVID in her facility. We did not know that the facility was accepting COVID-positive patients, something that I'm sure, as a daughter, as a caregiver, we should have been told. That morning, our dreams were thwarted when we thought she was coming home. We thought she had a simple cold. We would not have dreamed that anything of this nature would have been kept from us. We resisted because we figured, how would we take my mom home if she couldn't breathe? She went in for knee surgery, not for breathing issues. We insisted on an x-ray, something that also the nursing home did not have in-house. She waited for 7 hours for an x-ray and for us to get the results. We get a call, she had a collapsed lung, and she's rushed to the hospital. What we thought was in her best interest due to the doctor's advice, routine therapy at a nursing home, routine therapy at a rehab facility, turned into our family's nightmare. This story is eerily similar across the families of Voices for Seniors. Routine surgeries, routine procedures in rehab led to the death of our parents, the death of our grandparents, the death of our many brothers and husbands and fathers. We will see justice. They are not forgotten because I am here. And I told my mother, my sister and myself, we will not stop fighting for her. We will not stop fighting for the 15,000 seniors that died. We have not forgotten those that were disabled that were also met the same fate. We will not stop talking for those who died in isolation, alone, bewildered, without their families, that just lost their will to live, who stopped taking their meds because they had no reason to take their next breath. They are not forgotten. My mom will not be forgotten. And I know that each day I am closer to justice and to answers and to knowing that she didn't die in vain. My mother was a lifelong Democrat, coming from a family of lifelong Democrats. And it's become a partisan issue that we cannot get both sides of the aisle to push this thing forward so that we can simply know what happened to our moms and dads. My mom shines tonight because I'm going to continue to be a voice for her and the 15,000 seniors who lost their lives that did not need to. And this issue should not go away, and I'm so grateful today. I would have traveled to the moon to be able to speak for my mom. But I'm grateful that it was just a 3-hour trip so that I can say that my mom counted and that her life counted. And her family is still burning with the desire to speak up for her and to seek justice and receive answers and justice for her and for all of those that died. And I'm so grateful for your time and your attention, and please do not let this issue die. In 4 years, I've met many great friends. We've grieved together. 4 years of crying, of speaking, of trying to hold truth to power for the frail. We're defending the frail. We're defending those that cannot defend themselves. And I've met a great friend, and made a great friend in Tracy Alvino. She's the director of Voices for Seniors. We fight hand in hand for her father and my mother, and I welcome her to speak on his behalf today.
It's been 4 years since Andrew Cuomo issued his fatally flawed mandate that caused the deaths of over 15,000 innocent senior citizens. My father, Daniel Alvino, was one of them. He was an Army veteran, Hall of Fame football official, and my hero. It pains me that people only know him for the horrible way he died and not the beautiful life that he lived. 4 years is too long to wait for answers. 4 years is too long to wait for accountability. 4 years is too long to wait for justice. 4 years is too long to wait for meaningful reform. 4 years is just too long. Our state is no better prepared to handle a pandemic today than it was 4 years ago, when over 15,000 seniors died by the stroke of Andrew Cuomo's pen. Today it's my father, tomorrow it could be yours. I couldn't save my dad, who died a miserable, agonizing death all alone. and I can't ever go back and give him a proper burial instead of being limited to 10 people at his gravesite. But Voices for Seniors is in the position today to honor the loss by protecting future senior citizens and making sure that over 15,000 innocent souls did not die in vain. Grieving nursing home families were promised an independent investigation into the state's COVID response. And here it is, 16 months and 3 weeks since the Olson Group was hired to do this review, and nothing but silence. It's reminiscent of the silence us families endured by Governor Hochul when Andrew Cuomo was causing preventable deaths, covering up those deaths, misusing government resources for VIP COVID test services, having his staff call us families a death cult, and profiting off the graves of thousands with a blood money book of lies. Us grieving families have been continuously disrespected by Andrew Cuomo and those in his orbit with insinuations that we are politically motivated. There is nothing political about the mass murder and the preventable deaths of thousands of senior citizens. Voices for Seniors is a diverse group that encompasses all genders, races, religions, and political ideologies. What unites us is a quest for answers and accountability for our loved ones that were taken far too soon from us. The 325 mandate was an equal opportunity killer, causing the deaths of innocents across the political spectrum, and to be honest, a lot of seniors that couldn't care less about politics. Blaming our quest for justice on politics is cheap and intellectual dishonesty at the highest level. I've got news for anyone who thinks time will erode our resolve to get justice for our senior citizens and protect future senior citizens going forward. We are never going away. And I hope it does, but it doesn't. But even if it takes another 4 years, we'll still be here every single year, reminding everybody what was done. Thank you very much to all our elected officials today, and thank you, Vivian, who's become a sister to me. Thank you very much.
Really, all I can say is God bless you, Vivian and Tracy, and thanks for what you're doing. You truly are Voices for Seniors. Next up, we have Assemblyman Josh Jensen, who serves as a ranker on the Health Committee in the Assembly. Josh?
Thank you very much, Leader. I want to say thank you to Voices for Seniors for being here and sharing your personal story. Thank you to Congressman Molinaro and all of my colleagues in the Assembly and Senate Republican conferences for being here to raise awareness 4 years later. 4 years ago, our whole world was working without a net. But when disaster strikes, there's a time to put in the net. The state's failure to publish any after-action report on the experience of our seniors and our nursing home residents after COVID-19 is a failure of our state's duty to ensure that this disaster never happens again. In December, the Reimagining Long-Term Care Task Force review and recommendations to the legislature was statutorily required. That commission still has yet to meet. Senator Gallivan showed the letter calling for the Olson report to be published or shared or talked about. That still has not happened. The Master Plan for Aging, which was supposed to provide recommendations, still has not published any recommendations when it comes to what happened in nursing homes and long-term care facilities during COVID. We hear about the 15,000 seniors who lost their lives due to the executive order for nursing homes to take in residents who are COVID positive. But we don't know how many New Yorkers lost their lives because of their failure to thrive due to isolation. We don't know the impact, as Congressman Molinaro said, to our disability community, who are in group homes, who lost touch with the people who love them the most through no fault of their own. When you're working without a net, mistakes happen. But it's key that you learn from those mistakes and ensure they never happen again. And instead of everybody coming together to stitch the net to save New Yorkers, we're still sitting in the grandstands wondering why the hell it happened. That is a failure on a multitude of levels. And I'm glad to be standing with colleagues in the legislature who understand it's not a political question. It's a question for families. It's a question of love to ensure that this never happens to a single person who's loved again. Thank you very much. And I want to introduce from the Senate, Senator Peter Oberacker.
Thank you, Leader Barclay. Thank you, Congressman Molinaro. Thank you, Vivian and Tracy, for taking time. And thank you, everybody, for coming around. You know, as someone who serves as a volunteer firefighter and first responder, I can say that it is critical that we have a detailed emergency response plan and a comprehensive review of how those plans work. After returning from an emergency call, it is always important that we go through and fully assess our performance, ensure that any errors are corrected, and clearly disclose all findings. Reports like this are vital. They lead to better care moving forward, and they provide answers to those who have suffered an unspeakable tragedy. Here we are in Albany, 4 years after one of the largest emergencies we've ever known. But the state has failed to do a proper emergency assessment when it comes to the death of thousands of loved ones in our nursing homes. The March 25th Nursing Home Directive, conceived by our then governor and health commissioner, needlessly endangered our most vulnerable. Parents, grandparents, husbands, and wives were taken from us. Thousands of families lost loved ones in our nursing homes as they are and are still waiting for answers. Where's the review? Where's justice? It's been 4 years, as you've heard before, 4 excruciating years. And we all know it didn't have to happen. Yet here we are today, still failing to admit the truth and failing to properly investigate why so many people died. It's past time for the state to step up, show some courage, and take action. New Yorkers are used to empty promises from Albany. However, in the case of COVID nursing home deaths, we cannot allow this miserable track record to continue. Thousands of families lost loved ones due to the March 25th directive, yet a full investigation is still not taking place. The fact that the Reimagining Long-Term Care Task Force has yet to meet and complete is a slap in the face for those grieving families. It's time for answers. It's time for transparency. And it's time to live up to our commitments and show some respect to those who have lost lives due to the reckless decisions made by the state. Thank you. So it's my pleasure to call up to the podium one of my assemblymen, Brian Miller.
Thank everyone for being here. This has been 4 years. It seems like only yesterday it happened. As I stand before you today, I carry with me the weight of an experience that forever changed my life. In March of 2020, I tested positive for COVID-19. And what followed was a harrowing journey that I wouldn't wish upon anyone. For 2 weeks, I battled for breath on a ventilator. And for 33 long days, I fought for my life in ICU, grappling with the aftermath of the virus that had ravaged my body. The memories of those days are etched into my mind, and I know that I am not alone in this. The COVID pandemic is remembered by many standing here today with great heartache. The Department of Health mandate, issued under former Governor Andrew Cuomo's administration, potentially compounded the tragedy by compelling nursing homes to admit COVID-positive patients. Today, as we mark the solemn 4-year anniversary of that fateful order, profound questions continue to haunt us. Though the answers may be difficult to hear, the people of New York State, particularly the families who have lost loved ones, are owed clarity and closure. It is imperative that we, as a state, embark on a journey of accountability and transparency. We must confront the painful truths of our past to ensure that history does not repeat itself. I implore Governor Hochul to prioritize the release of an independent, comprehensive audit, shedding light on the decisions and actors that shaped our COVID response. In 2021, legislation was signed establishing the Reimagining Long-Term Care Task Force, which called for a report to be released by May 1st, 2020. Yet, almost 2 years later, it has failed to deliver the answers our grieving families so desperately seek and deserve. Today, we stand united in our quest for justice and accountability. We owe it to those we have lost, to their memory, and to the future generations who will inherit the impact of this pandemic. The families standing here today are owed clarity and closure. Thank you all for listening to me. Next, Senator Pam Hemling. Want to say a few words?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to start by thanking Leader Barkley, Congressman Molinaro, and Voices for Seniors for hosting this important event. A lot has been said, so I'm not going to get into the details of March 25th, 2020, but I want to take a moment and tell you about Joanne Hovey. Her photo is right here. She's with my family, my children, my husband, and myself. Joanne, to me, was one of the most exceptional people I have ever known. She retired after 41 years as a distinguished and beloved public school teacher. She was so special to my family, like a second mother to my husband, Gary, and she was the grandmother to our children. Now, Joanne didn't die of COVID-19, but she did die in her nursing home. She was isolated and completely alone. To this day, it weighs heavy on our hearts that when she needed us most, and in the position that I'm in as a state senator, that government stood between us. I remember on Thanksgiving Day on 2020, we had spent every holiday with Joanne, and that day to my husband and I was going to be no exception. We went to the nursing home thinking there had to be a way to get in. There had to be. Or we could at least contact her virtually, see her, see how she was doing. But it didn't happen. My husband has a pickup truck. We drove around the back of the building to where her room was located. He put a ladder in the back of the pickup truck and climbed up 2 stories so he could try and get a glimpse of her in her room. For the final month of her life here on Earth, that's all we got was a glimpse through the window. When she passed, her death certificate read, "Failure to thrive." But I'm here to say, and I want to be very, very clear about this, Joanne and thousands of our seniors did die as a result of COVID-19 and the decision that was made on March 25th, 2020, regardless of what their death certificates read. I share this story with all of you as a reminder that these deaths are not statistics. As you've heard, these are real people, our loved ones. All the seniors, the 15,000 who died from the virus, and those who passed away isolated in nursing homes that were understaffed and challenged beyond belief, cannot be, and we will not let them be forgotten. We want the truth. We want transparency. We want accountability for the decisions that were made. And what we really want is to encourage that this never, ever, ever happens again. Along with my colleagues here, I will continue to pressure Governor Hochul and the legislature to release the independent review. We cannot fail Joanne and all of our seniors and their loved ones a second time. They deserve better, and as a state, we absolutely must do better. At this time, I'd like to call forward Assemblyman Joe DeStefano for remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Helming. Thank you, Leader Barkley, Tracy, and Vivian. I can't tell you what kind of a journey this has been. It's unfortunate that we had to meet under the circumstances that we did, but the one good thing that came out of it is I will forever have your friendship, I will always have your support, and you will always have mine. But it's deeply concerning that after 4 years of independent review still has not been conducted regarding the state's response to COVID crisis, leaving families who have lost loved ones without the justice they deserve. The lack of action verges on criminal negligence. Our mothers, fathers, siblings, and friends are not disposable. The nursing home directive from the Department of Health has resulted in preventable loss of numerous lives, with many victims still uncounted. Where is the accountability? It's been 14 months without any concrete answers, a disgraceful lapse in oversight and justice. The reputation of the New York State government for evading accountability is well known. As a dedicated member of the Committee on Aging and a long-standing supporter and friend for Voices for Seniors, I wholeheartedly stand with affected families in advocating for this long overdue accountability we need. The issue transcends party lines. There were people on all sides of the government that lost loved ones, and it shouldn't be a partisan issue, and in my mind, it isn't. It's a matter of our shared humanity. The tragic consequences of the Department of Health and our governor, our previous governor, order cannot be ignored. It is our duty to ensure families who have suffered loss receive the justice and closure they deserve. Thank you. And now, I'd like to introduce Senator Jim Tedisco.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the families who are fighting through this tooth and nail, and my colleagues here on both sides of the aisle. I think you should, and we all should understand, tragedies like this, viruses like this, pandemics like this don't go by legislative time or governmental time. Maybe you remember the first press conference by Governor Andrew Cuomo. I do. He stepped up to the podium and he said, "Don't worry about any pandemic. New York State is prepared. We're going to deal with it. What you have to worry about is an unreasonable fear of a virus because we're ready, New York." Well, he was wrong on both counts. We should have feared what was coming forth, and we were not fully prepared. But above and beyond that, what we were not fully prepared for is his failure to mitigate the deaths, 80,000 or more, in the 15,000 of our most vulnerable populations through many of his actions that took place. It's been 4 years, and what's unconscionable, and it has been mentioned, there has been no review, no independence, no outside resources who have actually taken a look at the mistakes, the missteps, the things we did right. So the next time, without the legislative timetable preparing us or the governmental timetable preparing us, we're ready to battle this in a realistic way. Now, the governor had a whole bunch of enablers across the way here. In 2020, after he put forth with Commissioner Zucker something a fourth grader would have known enough not to do, put a serious contagious COVID disease into nursing homes via the argument that those seniors who have it shouldn't be discriminated against. They can't be in hospitals right now. We've got to place them in the nursing homes. You have to accept that. You know who was discriminated against? The families and their loved ones who have spoken today. Those were the individuals who were discriminated against, our seniors, vulnerable. When these individuals went into those nursing homes and spread that disease, They got very sick. Who came? The ambulance. They took them out. They put them in an ambulance. They took them to the hospitals. And yes, many of them died in hospitals. And then the governor lied about it. Well, not completely lied, but distorted the truth. These were all hospital deaths. There was 2 to 3 hospital deaths in nursing homes. He's kind of right, but absolutely wrong. When those individuals were taken out of those nursing homes, if they had died on the sidewalk on the way to the ambulance, would we have called them a sidewalk death? If they died in the ambulance on the way to the hospitals, will we call them a hospital death? Because they died in the hospitals, were they just a hospital death? The sidewalk didn't cause it. The ambulance didn't cause it. The hospitals didn't cause it. It was putting those individuals into nursing homes, but basically healthy individuals, compromised in certain ways, with people who had a very contagious disease. It wasn't their fault. The governor mandated it. This is Bill 2419. The only bill, the only legislative review, the only proposal for an outside, independent, bipartisan investigation and evaluation what actually took place during the whole course of this COVID virus in battling it. It was sponsored by Assemblyman Ron Kim for 3 years. Now, he didn't put the bill in this year. But I'm wondering, and I'd like some people to ask him, is it all over? You've got the answers already? I appreciate that he put the bill in for 3 years for an outside, independent, bipartisan investigation. But we need it, because what the governor is doing is a joke. One governor, $4.3 million of taxpayers' money, North Carolina, for a company which she could very easily put her hands on the justice system there and say after she got some reviews, and I'm not certain what's happening with that, because it's 4 months late. Did she get some information about it, get a copy of it and say, I got to send it back and I think you got to work on it a little bit more? In other words, does she put her hand on the weights to have an impact on what that says? It's not a bipartisan outside independent investigation. It's a company which the governor, nobody else, used taxpayers' dollars to give them $4.3 million. I suspect to do what they've done before. Cover for this governor. Be silent for this governor. You remember Commissioner Bassett, the one that filed with Commissioner Zucker? Boy, I got right to her with a letter and called her office and say, I'd like you to do an investigation of everything that happened with the COVID, the good, the bad, so we can prepare, because we know what the adage is. If you have a tragedy and missteps take place and you don't remember them, history has a tendency to repeat itself. Do you remember what she said, Commissioner Bassett? We're going to go forward, and I'm not going to unravel what took place in the past. You're not going to unravel what took place in the past, but you're going to go forward. How is anybody going forward now after 4 years, and we're at the 4th anniversary of that governor who made that executive order to put people who had that contagious disease in with people who were pretty healthy to begin with, and 15,000 lost their lives. The worst tragedy for our seniors, maybe in the history of New York State. Now we got Commissioner McDonald. Hello. Not a word. Commissioner of Health isn't interested in unraveling what took place with this COVID virus. We do have to unravel. And remember this, and it's been mentioned. He did a masterful PR job. I think he got an Emmy, but he had to give it back, okay? Every week on TV, people getting the virus, people dying. He puts this executive order. Then he writes a book. Oops, sorry. He didn't write the book. His staff wrote the book, and you paid for it, the taxpayers of New York State. Then the Empire Center says, He keeps telling people, even though the AG had some ideas about what the real numbers were, the comptroller had some ideas, the Empire Center took him to court with the justice system. And I was proud to be a friend of the court. And you know what? We won. And the justice said it was 15,000. It wasn't 2 or 3 or 4,000. And you have to pay the legal fees, Governor. You think the governor paid the legal fees? He was indemnified. You paid the legal fees, okay? Because he lied and distorted the truth. And he continues to lie and distort the truth. Then we asked, I did, the presidents of our health committees in the Senate and the Assembly. You have subpoena power. Could you use that subpoena power and bring us all in and ask the real questions, hold their feet to the fire? Silence. They wouldn't do it either, okay? So what do we have here? We have the potential to have another virus around the corner, and we have no answers. What do the answers need to be? What are we going to do about a shortage of nursing homes, a shortage of beds, masks, ventilators? Where are we going to put those seniors who are still contagious that we know we can't put them back into a nursing home? The boats out there in the port, is it still there? They didn't put anybody in there. The Javits Center, how are we going to bring people from all the other areas of New York State to the Javits? We have to have a plan. What's the plan? I don't see it. 4 years, no plan. And I think we owe it to the family members, to the loved ones who lost their life, but to our constituents in the future to say, this is ridiculous. It's obnoxious. You've got to have an outside independent review because you can't give somebody $4.3 million and not put your hand on the scale and have something to say about what comes back to you. We need the real truth, and we have to get it in a bipartisan way because this is Democrats and Republicans and every affiliation. It has nothing to do with party or politics. Thank you so much.
We have one last speaker, certainly not last but not least, Senator Jake Ashby to close.
Well, I think all of the speakers today have done a great job, but in particular, the women that spoke earlier, hearing their stories is really what needs to resonate today. And when we hear that New Jersey recently put out a 910-page study, 70 pages of recommendations, and what do we have from New York? 0. And the word's been said before, it's negligence. And that's what should resonate today. And that's what should motivate us to get the job done, wherever that may be. As someone who worked in long-term care during the pandemic, as a clinician, I can tell you that it was misery, and we can do better, and we should. Thank you.